1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4. That's where you find the instructions of God.
Marriage is an enormously important social event in Uganda traditional cultures, one that can bring together large groups of celebrants, but also steeped with lots of intricacies and strains. Men and women are free to choose their own partner, but a marriage must then be negotiated with the family of the bride. Churches are not willing to marry a couple without the express consent of both parents. Both Muslims and Christians are likely to marry within their own group. For instance, over 90% of Christians marry another Christian. While exact rules vary from one ethnic group to another, generally, the couple cannot come from the same clan. Clans are generally very large. Among the Baganda people, a population of 5.8 million people is distributed among only 46 clans. Family members research each other's family backgrounds before any approval is given. A male suitor is expected to pay a bride price, which is set by terms that differ from culture to culture. The bride price shows no sign of disappearing as a cultural phenomenon. It is seen as a recompense for the cost and work that a parent put into raising a child, though the price is raised depending on the perceived qualities of the bride and the parents' bargaining power. It also recognizes that after a marriage, a bride is lost to the household she lives and becomes part of the husband's household and clan. With all these complexities and preconditions so pronounced for one to be qualified as married, tonight we seek to shed light on this subject of marriage in Uganda's context. In conjunction with the Uganda Registration Services Bureau, we are going to extrapolate on the law governing marriages in Uganda, types of marriages recognized by the Uganda government, the importance of marriage registration, and the impact of non-registration of marriages. You're welcome.
And thanks, Karagao Baldwin, your host tonight for this particular discussion. We disrupt the normal programming to bring you this important message that indeed is familiar to all of us across the board, whether young, old, or just about to wed, like you want to get married. And we are having this show sponsored and in partnership with the Uganda Registration Services Bureau. And straight away, let me just get to introduce my panelists coming from the Uganda Registration Services Bureau. On the extreme end, I have Philip Kalibala, Senior Registration Officer, URSB, and in the middle, the lady Provia Nangovi, Senior Public Relations Officer, and we are tackling marriage. I'm going to first explain the question of whether you're married or not. So let's reserve that, and I think let's build the curiosity to the audience. Okay. So, Philip, the law governing marriage is a bit old, and somebody can even accuse the lawmakers to say that this law is antiquated because of the length of time that it has lasted. Yeah. It was made in 1904. It's the Marriage Act 1904, and it has provisions for the place of celebration of marriage, registrars, etc. to be provided with books of certificates, entries to be made in marriage certificate, marriage in a registrar's office, many provisions, still quite relevant, but of course if an act was propounded in 1904, it sounds a bit pretty challenging to perceive that this is a law still governing us. So just help us to understand how pertinent and applicable this very act in the present day setup is.
Thank you, Baldwin, and thank you, viewers of NTV, all those who have tuned in to this program tonight. The question you've asked is quite pertinent, but it's two-way. This Marriage Act is both old, and you could say it's a bit behind times, but it's also still relevant. So it's making a balancing act in both spheres. It's all because it's 1904. It's pre-parliament, really. We can't say that there was debate by any parliament sitting at that time to give us this law to bind us as Uganda.
So it's a colonial law.
Merely, it was imported from probably India and wherever the British went, and they brought it to us here. That was 1904. Hardly had Uganda even been created. But the important thing is that it has captured aspects which are quite relevant, still relevant to us. And if you look through, as we shall see later on, if you look through the amendments that are being proposed, you will see that some of the aspects are being captured there. For instance, you've talked about the records. That's very important. The records will still be maintained. We shall still need registrars to enter these records and then file them to the Registrar General. We have civil marriages, where even the new proposed amendments have not made any difference really. And then we have say prohibited degrees of marriages. Okay, those ones have also been maintained in there. So these are things that you could say when we look at this law, we kind of look at it in awe of these people who made it. They were so visionary, and that's why it has remained quite relevant for over 100 years. But you could also say that it's old. When we're making an argument of its age, we usually say that it's pre the two world wars. And you know that the two world wars were major events in the world, and actually they changed so many things, especially concerning personal rights and human rights. Today, for instance, our constitution says that marriage, you only marry when you are 18, and you are free, the consent is yours. But these aspects are still contradicted in the Marriage Act. For instance, the Marriage Act says that you can only marry when you are 21, okay? And if you marry prior to 21, then you have to get consent from your parents. So those contrasts is that part of the amendments that we're suggesting is to harmonize.
Yeah,
every law,
I'm coming to
yes, every law has to be. Yes, so it becomes a balancing act. If we shall propose amendments, we shall just pick out certain things. We shall maintain certain things and then strike out certain things just to harmonize it with the current law.
And I will need you to outline some of those particular typical issues that are being proposed in the Marriage Bill 2017. Yes. Let me just come to Provia. So there are several marriage types, and in more elaborate or perhaps specific terms, the categories are civil marriages, monogamous and celebrated in the office of the Registrar General, church marriages, monogamous and celebrated in licensed churches, of course, according to Christian faith rites, customary marriages, Islamic marriages, Hindu marriages. So there are these 5 categories of marriages. We want to understand how did they get to be qualified, and to be qualified as to be legitimate, why does the state have to recognize various categories of these marriages rather than just to have one form? Perhaps they should just standardize a certain marriage category and say this is what is acceptable.
I think that the marriages, the types of the marriages are also determined by the kind of marriage you enter into, you as a couple. And the reason why they are categorized is because as an African society and as Ugandans, we are potentially polygamous, for example. But it doesn't mean everybody has to be polygamous. You will find someone who wants to have one wife. You'll find people who are comfortable having more than one wife. So you have to have provisions for different people.
But that is a contradiction, because I thought in constitution you standardize a practice, you standardize law. So if you're making a provision for someone to be polygamous and another one to be monogamous, so it's like you're giving a freelance cover that unless just for purposes maybe of business, somebody registers with you, it doesn't make sense to have that kind of variation in a standard practice of marriage. That is the contradiction, I think.
I think that, Baldwin, you will not find in any country or anywhere globally where you have one type of marriage in the country. Even in the Arab countries, there are marriages that there are people who profess to the Islamic law, but then also there are Christians. You have to strike a balance in any country, and there's no reason why you should constrain people to actually be in one sort of marriage, in one type of marriage. We are in a society where we profess to Christianity.
So marriage law simply varies with the context of society. That's
exactly.
Best. Okay.
Exactly. You have to be able to cater for interests of different people and different persons. That's why you see there are monogamous marriages, the church marriages, where when you get married, you're bound there, my friend. You're not going to move and go into another sort of marriage until you dissolve that and also change your faith. You see, so there's an impact in every choice of marriage you choose. There are customary marriages where you know that if I do my kwanjula or kuhinjila, or there are so many different types in different parts of the country. And when you do those, when you contract or enter into those kind of marriages, you have to understand that if your husband decides that he doesn't want to take the other step of going to church, it's still a recognized marriage. But then it means you can be more than one. You see, those are the things people have to understand, and people have taken the customary marriages so much for granted because they expect that after I get into, they have met my family and we know each other and we are married, and that is it. Then they don't even go ahead to register them. So the very sharp gentleman will move from that customary marriage and move to church with another person who's not Provia. You see? And then you'll begin to contest something, but then you don't have ground for contesting it because you didn't even register it. Because all marriages have to be registered regardless of the kind of type of marriage. But then also when you go into that customary marriage, the discussion, you have to have a discussion and you say, look, this is what suits me at this point, but you have to understand that it's polygamous. So if you choose to stay at that level, you can be more than one. And customary can be even 10 wives, depending on someone's might in terms of the pocket, in terms of how hardworking they are, in terms of so many different things, you know. So even as family, even as couples, as you make a choice of the marriage you want to get into, you have to be cognizant of the fact that there are some marriages that are going to bind you. So you don't begin complaining after you've entered into that marriage, but then why did you get B and C and D and E and
so different categories of marriages have different implications.
Yeah, the different implications.
Okay, and I think the attempt to harmonize these particular contradictions, Philip, is the proposition which is brought up in the 2017 Marriage Reform Bill, which gives different propositions to actually harmonize the Customary Marriage Act to make sure that the Customary Marriage Act, the Divorce Act, Cap 249, the Hindu Marriage and Divorce Act, the Marriage Act Cap 251, and Marriage of Africans Act 253 are all harmonized, just as you were saying that the Constitution provides that the person can make their own choice, or they can determine, they have a personal right to choose whatever it is that they want, in regard, of course, to either contracting, to marriages, when they're 18, but then this 1904 Act just talks about 21. So it just help to give a bit of more detail about like 3 prominent issues that are actually being propounded in this particular proposal, the 2017 Marriage Bill, which had been brought earlier on and it was hugely fought and is still on the shelves right there being debated.
Okay, for instance, the marriage, I think that's the Marriage and Divorce Bill.
Yes. But it was revised now. It is just called the Marriage Bill 2017 because of the implications.
Because of the implications, the Marriage Bill 2017. First of all, operationalizing it and harmonizing it with the Constitution for all our laws. For instance, the issue of age, that is quite important. So the minimum age is 18, and with Uganda,
and it's the age of consent.
It is the age of consent. Yes, it is the age of consent, and Uganda does not have a minimum age for marriage. You don't go below that age to get consent from anywhere. So you'll see that, for instance, in the Customary Marriages Act, the lady can marry when she's 16, and the gentleman when he's 18. Then the civil marriage, the Marriage Act that we have, 21, that is the minimum age, and if you are below that, then you get consent from your parents. Then the Hindu is also 16. Okay, so these various ages, like Provi has said, because of the context in which we are, you know, the marriages were made within the African context. Yes, the state could have had its interest. It can say, we are interested in this, but it also has to be very sensitive to the different practices. So the issue of age, so we harmonize, because for us, when we are interpreting the law, we put the Constitution above all the other laws. So we have that. And then we have, for instance, issues to do with civil marriages, okay, where they are supposed to be celebrated. There are certain things that would require, before for instance, we conduct a background check, okay, before civil marriages are conducted. That one was put in the current marriage law, and it wasn't very clear in the older, in the older law. It wasn't very clear. We have issues of what do you call it in patrilineal, a patrilineal way of looking at things. Okay.
Meaning usage of men.
Yes, the lineage follows from the father.
Patriarchal
it follows. So I'm Kalibala because my father, and that is my clan, and my children, like that. So all the children are considered to be there. So if even when you're a woman, they trace you from you. But now, because of the rights issues that we talked about, there is a balance there. Because some people are saying, you know, why do I have to trace her through the father's lineage? Okay. Also, the mother was there. So we are bringing the mother on board, females, if this is a detail, because it looks something like it looks something like it looks simple today. Someone can laugh it off, but actually in those days it was a big deal, and actually women were not represented in the terms of lineage. So also that one, we are capturing it and putting it in the current marriage laws. And then we also have the provision, we have a separate laws now providing for instance, Christian marriages and their practice. That wasn't pronounced anywhere, because the laws that we have are saying that, you know, religious marriages shall be conducted according to the customs of the practitioners. So the Catholics conduct according to their practices, and so do the Anglicans and SDA and all those. But now, in the amendment, it was a bit clear. There were lines, okay? Who should you marry? How should you marry? How you should go about the marriage? There were things like those. So a little bit of detail. Yeah, but like I've said, there is also capture from there. For instance, the prohibited degrees, okay? Those ones are strictly pursued, like you've had in the clan system. You know, like for most of Uganda, most of our cultures, I think prohibit that issue of clan. So that one was captured in the law. Okay, it was consolidated. There were also other issues that were incorporated.
But it's still a bill. Let's not proclaim it as a law.
It's still a bill. Those proposals, yes. There were, but you saw, but there were also controversial areas. Things to do with the wider substance of marriage, yes. Which might not really be so much in line with registration, because for us we are concerned with registration. Yeah, but there are those issues that were controversial. For instance, cohabitation, properties, what is marriage, now who you should marry. Then people were against polygamy, others were pro-polygamy, things like those.
And I'm coming to that to probably just after a break, because I need you to help us understand your business is to register marriages and other issues, rather other areas, including business. Okay, and we are going just to understand what are the qualifications for you actually to certify that this is a legitimate marriage in all those categories. Perhaps three: the Islamic marriage, the customary marriage, and the Christian marriage. And our viewers, let me just first go for a short break, and we'll be coming back to engage much further in this discussion. Thanks for keeping with us. Thanks our viewers for keeping with us. I'm Karaga Baldwins, and we're coming to you live from the Kampala International Conference Center, and we're discussing marriage, a very familiar subject to all of us, and an interesting one. Definitely, I believe so many people are aspiring to get married. But what are the implications? What are the obligations? And what are the processes for you to have a qualified marriage? So, Provia, just to understand how, because your business, especially in this area, is to make sure that you authenticate, you register, and you certify a marriage. So, I'm a Christian, we've married. I'm a Muslim, we've married. We're in a customary kind of arrangement. We feel we've gotten married. What is the criteria you take to say that now this is legitimate and this is appropriate for you to get the registration and certification? Okay. Especially in those three categories. Okay,
I'll start by saying there is no implication in getting married, apart from fun, and getting married when you're ready.
I won't ask whether you're married.
So the implications will come when you're not ready to get married to your partner. So you asked about how do we find out that a marriage is legitimate, and the different types of marriages are bound by the rights and customs of that particular marriage.
So let's first talk about Christian marriage.
A Christian marriage is...
what do you require for somebody to be now qualified and have merited to get your certification or registration and say this is a legal marriage that this person is in?
Yeah. Christian marriage lined to the church marriage. So for a Christian marriage or a church marriage, what we call a church marriage, it should have been conducted in a licensed place of worship. What I mean by that is there are several different churches where people go and pray and praise and worship and talk to God. But these different churches, okay, we don't go into how a church is run and its business, no. But these churches, if they want to wed, they do it on behalf of government. That's how far back the law is, 1904. But also because government wants to safeguard these marriages. So there has to be one person, a central repository of information on marriages. So the churches wed on behalf of the government. But of course, also God above, and if you're Christian. So a church has to be licensed to wed. So regardless of the fact,
including the person who weds, I guess, as
even there are some.
the person who conducts the wedding.
There's a criteria for the church. We don't license the person who conducts the wedding, but every other church that wants to get a license, there's a criteria. So it has to furnish us with information. It has an address. It has a structure, because we don't want people to get married in structures that are shaky and are going to fall after one day. It has to have a structure. It has to have a pastor.
But how does a structure now qualify for somebody to get married? That sounds a bit nebulous.
Oh, wait a minute, because there are several provisions. If I go into this, I will not finish.
All right.
Because someone even has a choice to get married at the beach.
Exactly.
Okay? But also at the same time, we want to know that the church, there is actual a location where we can find this church, just in case of anything. So we don't want to just license a church that is under a tree. That is unfair to people. And then marriages begin to be conducted under trees. So even that church that is licensed, and then it goes out and opens branches, as you're seeing many churches now doing. And then you have one branch maybe on Kampala Road, one in Nigeria, whatever. All those different churches have to acquire a license to celebrate marriages. So that is, so after you have conducted that wedding, the churches are bound by the law to file records of these marriages with our office. So we ask them to file every month. Of course, there are churches that don't conduct weddings every month, especially maybe out of Kampala. But the ones within Kampala always file those returns, the ones which are licensed. So when we get a record of that marriage, then we enter it into our marriage database.
Then civil marriage?
It is. A civil marriage is actually one of the best marriages. But I'm not saying that there is a best marriage. They're all good marriages, but its process is quicker. It's less hectic. It's private. And we're seeing so many people actually conducting civil marriages.
So how
they
is
don't
it
want
done?
to. For a civil marriage, within Kampala, we conduct the weddings between 10 to 4 p.m., just like normal church wedding. We don't exceed 4. The law says we have to end at 4 p.m. when it's still bright, so that you don't bring another partner. Not the one that you had come with the first time. That's a joke. So anyway, civil marriage within Kampala is conducted at our offices. So what usually happens?
URSB offices.
Yes. And from Monday to Friday. And the requirement, of course, you have to be an adult. You have to be single. And if you are married before, then you have to probably have gotten out of that marriage that you were in before, so that now you're free to wed again.
And the proof of singleness or being prior marriage is because you have a registered record for that marriage. If perhaps you don't have that registration, but this person has been conducting marital affairs, either out of cohabitation or promiscuity, that is not regarded. There's no background checks to actually find out that besides this person having no certification here, he might have other engagements maritally with other people.
Marital. Well, usually what happens is we take the person's word. So the person has to also, on top of the requirement, has to give us an affidavit showing that, saying that me, Provia, I'm not married at this moment and I want to get married to Baldwin. And so we take your word. And that word, that is a binding document. So we make sure you file an affidavit showing that at that point you're single. If you lied before and you were married before, then you see that's an issue, contracting a marriage when you're already in a marriage. So when you file those documents with us, then we conduct them. We do the same way the church does it, 21 days. Put your marriage bands out there. We have TVs where we put them and everybody sees you. So if you're hiding from someone and you're already married, someone will come in and see you. And then after if nobody comes to contest that marriage, just like in church, you come and set a date and we wed you. And then the beauty of it is when we wed you, we give you a certificate that same day. So you can go and...
Okay. Then customary, just briefly?
Customary is according to the rites of that particular custom. For example, where I come from, they would require that before they get married, African culture, you provide evidence that you're going to be able to take care of me. And the evidence is in several different ways. It can be monetary, it can be animals, cows, goats, whatever, depends. And then you conduct that marriage. After the parents have agreed, of course, their families that sit together and agree and allow the daughter to get married. And then it's usually done at the family, the side where the woman is from or the lady is from. So after that marriage is conducted, it has to be registered at the sub-county. So after it's registered at the sub-county, there's a form they file with us. So we get details of that marriage. But we are noticing several times that people, after they get married and get a certificate, usually of, for example, if you're in Kampala, of Uganda, they think that is it. So we are working with the kingdoms to ensure that they educate people that the certificate is something else.
Oh, so if I return the introduction letter, okay, so the letter is usually issued at the introduction. You go buy it from some office, then have it presented at the ceremony, and then the parents show consent to it. That is not enough in itself if I keep record of it. No. Okay, that is really shocking. Okay, thanks for you on that. I definitely still just digging on that. And Philip, of course, people would wish to know the cost of this. And she was giving the detail of where the customary marriages are registered at the sub-county. All other marriages must be registered with the registrar at your place. But there are cost implications, and I think if I can read out just a few: civil marriages, display of notice is free, file notice of marriage is 10,000, celebration of marriage is 200,000 for national applicants, registration of marriages at URSB and districts is 25,000 a bit. How do you come up with this cost structure? And don't you think that actually this cost structure is a bit an impediment for people to have an encouragement to get involved in this? I can see Provia shaking her head. I don't understand. Yes, so the cost implications of this, and how do you come to actually set up these prices? And if somebody doesn't have, does that negate the fact that actually shouldn't be more?
And frankly speaking, we don't really think that the costs are a strain, or they are constraining the processes of registration. Obviously, the persons who came up with these fees, there was a debate and a discussion, okay, putting all factors in consideration, really, the economics, and then the marriages, and then they spread out within the four corners of the country to see that actually this is a fee. These are fees that persons can afford. But there is a process.
But you see, Philip, and definitely this is already clear that there's a payment to it. And you know how young people are struggling, okay? The process of just organizing a ceremony is extraneously exorbitant nowadays. And then you have this concept, when you go to the church demands other fees besides this fee. So you just, if you want to have more subscriptions for the expression of interest that we're getting married, don't you think really a fee should either be eliminated or should be substantially reduced?
For instance, let me tell Ugandans watching the program that fees are set by the law. It's the Acts of Parliament that set these fees. The Parliament requires that fees, there are government services for which people will pay, and registration of marriages is one of them. So it's in the Act of Parliament. So when it's in the Act of Parliament, then the rest of us, our job is to implement what has been given to us. And so all these
do these fees somehow help in the functional efficiency of your organization, of URSB? Is that the implication? Because people would wish to understand why they are contributing these fees, just to be able to justify this kind of
that's the government revenue. That's the government revenue, and it goes on the consolidated fund. It's not retained by URSB, not even a coin. So it was not internal. They are what we call statutory instruments. They are subsidiary laws to the Acts of Parliament, which the Minister of Justice signed. Fees were presented to him. Probably they were debated somewhere, and then they decided that actually these fees are fair, and so they passed that. So the fees are regulated. There are legal provisions for them. They are not erratic. They are not set according to whims. In URSB, it's not the Registrar General that sets this. This just come to us, and then we implement. And then we're looking at the fees. For instance, well, not to sound insensitive, probably there are Ugandans who will make an issue on these fees, but we've really thought that these fees are as fair as they can be. For instance, we talk of the marriages for church, and then we talk of civil marriage. Civil marriage is going to cost you 320,000. Okay, that's all that the whole package, including a certificate, will cost you. You will not need to pay anything more than that unless you've contracted a lawyer, someone to do for you this work. But what the government will ask of you is that. And so, fairly enough, if you contrast it within the marriage market, so to say, and you realize how much people are paying elsewhere, really, you would feel that that is fair. If the government says that Ugandans have a right to marry, and actually the government is saying that Ugandans should marry, I think that's a fair fee in as far as the government marriage is concerned. Okay, it's a fair fee. And then we have a customary marriage. Now, the customary marriage, we almost have nothing to do with the fees because people spend millions upon millions of shillings, up to 20, 30, 40 millions. They go and they contract this customary marriage. Then they give these gifts, cars, cattle, animals, and everything. And then the government is asking you that, you know what, just to make that ceremony legal and have effect, get 20,000 and come and register with us. And so this is what we are balancing. We go back and ask ourselves, is this fee really not considerable if you consider the circumstances under which? So it's 20,000 shillings to register a customary marriage, and if you violated registering within 6 months, then you will pay 40,000 shillings. Okay? Then for church, despite all the pompous, the glossiness and everything, okay, hundreds and hundreds of millions of shillings are being spent on this ceremony. And the government is saying, just get 35,000 of that and come and file a record with us to show that actually this marriage, for this marriage to be legal. Okay, just use 35. So we leave it, okay, Ugandans will be the judge here. Exactly. Eventually, Ugandans will be the judge. And like we've always said, you know what? Yeah. Because for us, our job is to implement. If government says in the morning, like probably the president did with OTT, and it slashes all those fees by even 30 or 40%, we shall be here justifying the fees that actually have been revised. It will not be up to us to set these fees. Okay,
and I think so. The vehement expression on that. And so, probably the Marriage Act, of course, still 1904, it gives an elaborate provision to the licensing of churches, and it gives it a special status. It describes that marriages may be celebrated in any licensed place of worship, just as you said, of any recognized minister of the church, denomination, or body by which the place of worship belongs. So why is the church having that kind of special status attributed to it? But also, how do you engage with churches? Is there any kind of supervisory engagement with those churches to see that there's no exploitation of the people actually that are getting these marriages, that these marriages are not disputable? Because there are cases actually that have come out that churches have conducted marriages which are disputable, but because the church has done it on your behalf, if the other person brings a certificate, you try to certify them. So why the special status of the church, and how do you work with them? Just the relationship, URSB and the church.
We have, I would say we have a very good relationship with the churches. We have, for a couple of years, been engaging them to understand the role they play as duty bearers in the chain of registration of marriages. They appreciate it, they understand it, and I would say that we have seen an increase in them actually being compliant in terms of registering, filing the records of these marriages they conduct. But now, I would say that if you conducted a marriage somewhere else in another church, I would say a real marriage, where actually you went ahead and registered that marriage, you didn't end up conducting that marriage, and that church was licensed. I do not think that any reverend, any pastor would go ahead and wed another, maybe another man with another partner. You can attest to it. Assuming, no, I don't, and I do not think any church would do that if you bring the evidence. Now the problem with us as Ugandans, we are very lax. We relax after a period of time. After you do something, you just relax. You imagine that now it's the end. Now I'm married. I have to begin enjoying the fruits of that marriage. Yourselves, last year you ran a story that made loads of round. I think it was last year, but 2016, of a marriage that was stopped in that tried to be stopped in All Saints Church. I do not, and I know you brought us onto TV to explain the legality of that marriage and things of the kind.
The good thing you brought the example yourself.
I brought the example myself.
Yes.
But you see, if there is no evidence, the Reverend had engaged the couple before to bring evidence.
So marriage is a ceremony. It's not necessarily the practice, because I think that's where now the irony is. Marriage gets qualified to be marriage because of a ceremony, not necessarily because of the practice. And that's what I was alluding to earlier on, that if people are actually having marital practice, they're sleeping together, they have children together, and that was the argument in that church, that actually with this particular man, I have 4 children. He is taking on another wife. And you can see very blatantly that this man has, you can go and do a DNA test if that dispute has been undertaken. So if you are only saying that a marriage is qualified by a ceremony, I think it begs judgment to the public that actually I think that is not appropriate, that there should be some kind of concrete assessment besides the ceremonial rites.
I think that boldly now you're going into semantics. You're going into what is a marriage and what is a relationship and which one should we qualify and take care of, and actually the bill is going to take care of that. But now in a situation where you're living with, cohabiting, what they call cohabiting for years, and I mean,
and
even
have children.
And have children. What you're fighting for is protection of your children. What you're fighting for is probably property you worked for together. And I think that even when you go to the courts of law, no one is going to throw out that case. There is evidence. They are children. And you see, children are not part of your disagreement and you're breaking apart. But we are actually also speaking about what is called a marriage. A marriage, some Christians will have a wedding, Muslims will have a nikah, customary will have a kwanjula. It's a ceremony, you see. But we shouldn't cohabiting, we shouldn't bring it in here and begin saying that because I cohabited, I own the woman, I own the man. People need to understand that actually if you're cohabiting, you're at risk. So if you want to live on the edge, that is what you call the implication. And
so meaning that as long as the church has not conducted, or perhaps there's no public exercise conducted ceremonially to honor that particular vow taking, or perhaps the commitment to marriage, it will not be regarded as a marriage.
Your friend.
And actually,
because of the running out of time, but probably, it's understandable. Of course, there has to be legal ways of making sure that things are done, and that's a controversial area, so let me just leave it at the camp to him. Just a minute. So as you respond to what we're saying, just in a few minutes, because we're about to leave out, the implications of getting married under an unlicensed church.
Now, the implications of getting married under an unlicensed church, this one I have to look in the camera and tell Ugandans without really mincing words. Because we are not going to be so soft when we are approaching this. Ugandans are losing too much. One, that marriage becomes unregisterable. If you go and marry in a church that has no in a place of worship, really, that has no license, for those ones who are Christian practitioners, we shall have nothing to do with that record, and we shall not put it on the national register. And if you want to use that record for anything, we shall not receive it. And these cases are multiple. Even on Monday, Tuesday, as the next week begins, they will be there in our offices. But the beauty is, we are here now on TV, and maybe you are going to marry tomorrow, or you are going to marry on Sunday. It's not too late. Still find out whether that church has a license to marry. Now, as we're on TV now, we get pastors or fathers or reverends or whoever. It is criminal under the laws of Uganda to conduct a marriage of Ugandans in a place that you know doesn't have a license, okay? And then you go ahead and conduct that marriage. That becomes a criminal act that is chargeable. And now, of course, it will become a criminal act right now because you've watched us on TV and probably you know what you're going to do tomorrow or the next week. You don't have a license, but you're going on to celebrate marriage tomorrow. So it would have been advisable that if those are the circumstances, you can shift the marriages to another church, so that you give, because you see, when this is all said and done, it's you, the Ugandan, that loses, okay? For us, we're just marriage celebrants. We preside over. You become the primary victim. And this is actually what the state is trying to protect against. Ugandans should never cry simply because you are negligent or you didn't follow the laws to go and get your church licensed. Be open, and also let Ugandans try to enforce this by finding out whether these churches have a license. Now,
just in a short brief, because I have just 2 minutes to be out of here. In a short brief, how does somebody find out that this church is registered or not?
2 things. We've empowered Ugandans to enforce this. Ugandans will be very primary and quite important in this enforcement. People have come to us. I think they have been so, I don't know. Certain people get scared. We don't have this frank talk. So you are the pastor or you are the reverend, and I can't frankly look in your face and ask you whether the church has a license. That's the challenge that Ugandans are finding. But the Ugandan is the first enforcer. And then the other thing that you can do silently, if that is too much for you, just come and carry out a search. You're going to marry in a church. Probably tomorrow is too late, maybe, but on Monday, for those ones who are going to marry the other weekend or within the week, they can just come and carry out a search at our offices to establish whether
is that search doable online?
It will be doable online probably in January or in by Feb.
Okay, thank you. Just on that note, thanks, Philip. Provia, let's wrap it up in this way, just by articulating in about 30 minutes benefits of having a registered marriage.
We have been speaking about these benefits from when we started. Generally, like Philip said, it also safeguards the marriage, or what you call the relationship, or what you have together between the 2 people. And their circumstances, our office also has the Administrator General's office. We have had circumstances, or we have seen, actually not even had alone, but we have seen situations where people actually are fighting. I was the wife, no, you weren't the wife. I was the wife, I had the more children. All of these were in a relationship, which you call a relationship, but nobody actually owned the person that passed on. Now it comes to issues of management of the estate. That's where the state comes in and says, you're not going to fight over property because you have children, you have responsibilities, and the state has to actually intervene and begin dividing your property. I would say that is very callous. If you're a man, you're planning your life, you're a woman, you're planning your life, do the right thing. Safeguard your wealth for your children, for your ancestors, for your that lineage of your family and things of the kind. But also at the same time is we have situations where people probably want to travel together for medical reasons and you want to escort your spouse. Usually they will not just ask you for marriage, but they will say go and certify it at the national office before you can actually travel. So if you're in the circumstance of that Philip spoke about that is unlicensed, where are you going?
Okay, on that note, because time constraints indeed is coming to 11.
But we can come back tomorrow.
Absolutely, we are looking forward to that. Indeed, you've been brilliant and prolific in your contribution towards marriage, legal marriage advocacy. Philip, who is the Senior Registration Officer, and Provia Nangovi, Senior Public Relations Officer, URSB. It's been a pleasure.
The time is never enough.
Absolutely, but you've been brilliant.
But they can maybe just...
Philip, it can happen.
No, the address.
Thanks our viewers. URSB has a web portal, it has a website, it's on all social media platforms, and thanks for keeping with us in this pertinent discussion that really cuts across all ages and all communities. I'm very grateful indeed for you keeping us as your #1 station. I'm Kaga Borins. Please have a great night.